I was to title this talk, it would be called None of These Diseases. It's mainly a talk about the Bible and how the Bible for well over 3,000 years was the best and most perfectly accurate medical book / public health book ever written up until the 19th century. But I'm going to start off with the train tracks. You'll see why. These are pictures of early American bridges, train bridges. They're called trestle bridges. This is pictures of wrought iron bridges in Europe in the early 1800s. They started using iron because see how you don't have to support every single, like remember the trestle bridges had support for every single point. These you can have a little bit of a span. Not a big, great span, but you can have a big span. You come to the Eads Bridge in St. Louis. This is one of the most famous bridges in the United States. It was started construction in 1867. Andrew Carnegie, the steel magnate out of Pittsburgh, is the one who did this with steel. First time a bridge was made out of steel, not wrought iron. And you can see, this is a picture of it still standing today. It's across the Mississippi River at a wide point where nobody would have ever built a bridge before. It's an amazing engineering. For so many reasons, it was an amazing engineering feat. This span is 500, well, the middle one is the widest, and it's 520 foot from center. This was thought impossible. And that a train, fully loaded cargo train goes on it. Well, when people first saw this bridge, nobody wanted to use it. The Americans were used to the trestle bridges where you've had support every 4 feet, right? The Americans weren't even used to wrought iron bridges hardly. And here Andrew Carnegie comes and he builds something like this. Now today, over 10,000 cars and trains go back and forth on it every day. We used to have to cross the Mississippi River here using a barge or a ferry. Because nobody would use the bridge, Carnegie was very frustrated, but he hired Barnum Bailey Circus and one of their elephants. This is a picture of it. This is a reenactment, East meets West, to cross the bridge. And the reason he did it was because 2 reasons. 1, elephants are very heavy. And 2, it was legendary that elephants never cross an unstable structure. They're just intelligent that way. The elephant walked across it with the circus people, no problem. From then on, everybody used the bridge, But going back to this picture, right? If you're the first people to cross that, in fact, everybody that crosses that bridge, you got to have faith in that steel. Because people want to know, well, what's faith? A lot of Christians today and that think they know the Bible, and I'm not putting anybody down, but I'm just telling you, they think that faith is belief in something that you can't see, like God, you can't see him, and you have faith is just a blind acceptance. That's not what faith is. The New Testament says faith is the substance of things hoped for. This is in Hebrews. And in the evidence, and it's the evidence of things not seen. Biblical faith is always based on substantial facts and evidence. They're without exception. And if there isn't substantial facts and evidence, it's blind faith that I would call stupid faith. Once the elephant crossed, no problem. If the elephant can cross, you can cross. That's the idea here. And what I'm going to show you is, in this talk, I want you to think in the back of your mind, you forget this, but when you're thinking in the back of your mind, at what point does the elephant cross the bridge that you can't deny there's a God? So what's the number 1 health need in the world? Anybody know? Exactly, clean drinking water. These are real pictures. They're not. None of this is staged. Almost nothing here is staged. That kid is drinking that water. It's somewhere in Asia. This is a typical in Asia. And I'm not talking rich Asia. I'm talking about before West, before East met West. I'm talking about before modern plumbing. That's what's function as their sewer, And this little kid, he's actually doing his business. That's common. They don't have toilets. They don't have plumbing. Think back to before the 1900s. How many people did they have plumbing then? No. They didn't even think they needed it. So modern plumbing hasn't been around and since we understood public health in the 1900s. It's the 20th century, basically. So for 3,000 years, this could have been the norm. And it actually was in the vast majority of the world. And even today, it's the norm in certain places. Pretty unbelievable when you know how dangerous that kind of living is. These are modern pictures. That's their toilet is the river. Okay, I'm serious. This is in Africa. Because African continent has really been reached, and Africa is a lot Christianized now. It's not as anywhere near as much pagan as it was in the early 1900s to the first of the 20th century. Africa's a lot of Christianized. This guy right here, he knows what he's doing is wrong. That's why he's covering his face. They're not supposed to do that in here. But why they're doing it is, well, there's a few reasons. One, you got to go, you got to go. It's hard to walk someplace where it's safer to do it. We'll talk about that. But it's also real, it's just too easy to do this, okay, if you don't have indoor plumbing. And I don't blame them for doing it if you don't have indoor plumbing, okay? Before the 1900s, we're talking at least 3,000 years of world history, nobody would have known that that's dangerous. It would have been that's where you do it so it gets away and you don't smell it. Some people like privacy, okay? This is like another place in Asia. You know, the other place everyone was showing off here. They want to have privacy, but their business is going into the water. Just know that. It's going into the water that goes into a river somewhere. Like open sewers, public toilets run out into the city streets and then out to the river. This is being a city. They just do their business here. Those are turds, you know, and the rainwater comes, washes it out to the river. That's the Ganges River in India. Ganges. This is actually a real true. This is from Punch magazine in the 1800s. It's a depiction of the Thames River in London. And this guy, they because it stunk so bad, a character artist drew this picture with the caption, "Come, my dear, come to the old Thames and have a nice bath." Because if you're poor, you didn't have any other place to take a bath but the rivers. If you're in London, India, or London, England, and you don't have a lot of money, that's where you took a bath. You see they got dead animals floating in the water. That is not an exaggeration, okay? This is how they did their business. That's the same magazine, Punch magazine, calls that indecent. You know why? Not because she's doing her business in the street, but because she didn't walk to one of these stalls. But it's the same. It still runs into the river. This right here, this guy's name was Professor Faraday. He wrote a letter to the editor of the Times newspaper. I'm just going to read a little bit of what he said, because the appearance and smell of the water, he's talking about the Thames River. The appearance and smell of the water forced themselves all at once upon my attention. The whole of the river was an opaque, pale brown fluid. Near the bridges, the fetulence rolled up, that means feces, rolled up in clouds so dense that they were visible at the surface, even in water of this kind. The smell was very bad. It was the same as that which comes now up in the gully holes in the streets. The whole river was a real sewer. That's the gully holes. That's where the feces and all that runs into the gutters of the streets and then out to the rivers when it rains. Okay, it's not an exaggeration. And he says, there is nothing figurative in the words I have employed or my approach to exaggeration. They are the simple truth. He's like one of the first, conservationists or environmentalists in London. And Punch magazine responding to his article, Punch magazine put out another character saying, "And we hope the dirty fellow," that's the Thames River, "will consult the learned professor." The river stunk because it was an open sewer. And it's not just rivers. People put not only their feces, but they would put their garbage out in the street. This is modern time, okay? I don't know if the garbage people are on strike or what. Imagine if it can happen now when people know that this is a horrible thing to do. Imagine what garbage problems could be like back when then this would just be unsightly, but it wouldn't have been considered a health risk. This is a real picture of London streets in the late 1800s. That's swept up, getting ready to be carted away by the garbage collectors. But this is a rich area, okay? This is where wealthy people go and shop and eat their food in restaurants, okay? That's all the garbage. And because they got money, they can get rid of it. Think about if you're middle to lower income in the cities, there's your garbage dump. Nobody comes and picks it up. You know what happens to that? Rats eat it. Okay, here's why. Right now, our garbage, like we got paper plates, plastic plates, we have a lot of things that are non-biodegradable. We could never, if we did this, our garbage would pile up to the tops of the skyscrapers. Back then, all garbage was organic material. Organic material, no problem, the rats will eat it. It'll decompose, turn into dirt, and the rats get whatever they can. And it works. Okay, it works until, imagine what it was like before running water. They're getting their drinking water from this, it's like a garbage dump. It's pretty unbelievable. And I showed, here they got a pipe, there's running water, but it's going to the city. Those kids are poor. They don't have the luxury of living where there's running water. But this pipe, back in the 1800s in London, nobody had that. They got your water from wells all around the city. Solutions were needed because here's your outhouse, right? That's a solution because you just do defecating all around. It's going to leak down in the well water. Here's a problem. You have your outhouse pretty close to you because when you got to go, you got to go. But probably right around the corner is your well too, because who wants to walk miles for water? And then what that leads to is like what I already mentioned. It leads to contamination of groundwater from raw sewage. Eventually it happens. When that happens, well, in the old days, before they understood bacteria, they'd call it a plague of massive proportions. Thousands of people in cities would start to die. Nobody knew why. Here's an example of a public toilet. Here's your problem with this. If all you had was one outhouse, it's not too close to your well, probably okay. You start getting a city, okay, this stuff is gonna pile up in a spot, man. And it's going to get into your well water, okay? Very dangerous eventually. This will kill people. The only way to really do it, if we're talking outhouses, is to have one outhouse far away from everything else, very far away from your water supply. But it takes a lot of discipline to walk up the hill to that place. That means you got to start thinking about it before you really got to go. You got to think about it. It's going to take you 10, 20 minutes to get there, okay? Here, they're pumping their well waters right here. If these people don't walk several football fields away to do their business, it's going to get in here. And the village, one day, people are going to start dropping. And now we'd know why. Probably typhus, cholera. Okay, back in the day, nobody would have known why. They would have called it a plague. And religious people would have thought that God was cursing them, or they were under a curse of some idol. This is from Health 24. It's the deadliest epidemics throughout history. Cholera caused millions of deaths from ancient times till the present day. We're talking millions of deaths. It's caused by the bacteria Vibrio cholera. It's contracted through contaminated water that's been contaminated by human feces that has the bacteria in it, okay? So they do this in the street, ends up, kids go to the well and the kids die, okay? The worldwide epidemic, or not worldwide, but London got cremated with an epidemic. And they linked it to one well that was contaminated. And they didn't know that it was contaminated, okay? They just linked it to by how people were getting sick. And they just did a grid and they figured, well, all the people that are getting sick, it seemed to start in this area. And they just figured it was one well that was doing it. Because if they stopped using that well, people got better. But this is a literal placard from September 1832. Cholera, the Dudley Board of Health. Churchyards at Dudley being so full, no one who has died of the cholera will be permitted to be buried after Sunday. That's next to tomorrow. In either of the burial grounds of St. Thomas's or St. Edmunds in this town. All persons who die from the cholera from the future must be buried in the churchyard at Netherington. By the 1827, cholera had become the most feared disease of the century. They knew the symptoms, so they came up with the word cholera, okay? They didn't know what was causing it. They didn't know it was bacteria. This is a caricature of the day of a cholera patient who's likely to die, and all of the things that they tried. Emetic, that means stuff that makes you throw up. Blue pills, we don't know what those were. Starvation, okay? None of it worked. The guy was probably going to die, okay? And literally what you died of was actually dehydration. Because you have the diarrhea so bad, you dehydrate. This is the cause of it. Public toilets in the street. Okay, the Romans, this is a Roman bath, toilets in a Roman bath. Rome was way before England, London. They understood for some reason that you had to, probably because it stunk. The river stunk, everywhere stunk. Rich people didn't, no, this only rich people could use these in Rome. Okay, this wasn't for the poor people. But they didn't want the smell. And in a heavy rain, there'd be a little creek, like a little ditch of water that would go under this. A heavy rain would come and wash it all away. Okay, but it still went into the rivers. But at least by then, it kind of dried up, because eventually, if it dries up, the bacteria dies. This was more healthy. But isn't it interesting? The law of Moses in 1500 BC, over 3,000 years before the discovery of bacteria, okay, and that bacteria caused disease. The Bible said this: designate a place outside the camp where you can go to relieve yourself. That's actually not the whole verse. I'm holding off on the other half of the verse on purpose, okay? Because it's gonna be utterly astounding when you read the whole verse. But just to know this, right here, you go outside the camp, you're not gonna get cholera or typhoid or dysentery plagues, okay? Millions of people saved by that Bible verse throughout history. Say what you will about the Bible, that Bible verse is the most important public health sentence in the universe, okay? Smallpox killed more people, more than 300 million people in the 20th century alone. That's pretty late, okay? Kills basically 30% of the infected. That's what you look like when you get it, okay? That's another picture. 1/3 of the survivors end up partially or completely blind, okay? Now that lady probably died, but they wanted to show what she looked like. It's transmitted by inhalation, direct contact, touching when somebody has infection. It's interesting. Okay, well, I don't know if they're brothers, but this kid's going to get it because he's that close to that kid. Okay, but back in Bible times, you wouldn't know that touching causes it. You wouldn't have no idea why do you get sick? Okay, so in countries that don't understand bacteria, or times before the 1900s, because bacteria wasn't discovered till the very late 1800s, okay? Before the 20th century, you'd see this all the time. Sick people next to healthy people. This kid's going to get it just by touching him, or touching his bedding or his clothing, or drinking out of the same drinking cups. Okay, and this kid's got a 1/3 chance of dying. And so does this kid, believe it or not, even though he's not sick yet. The earliest evidence of smallpox dates back to Egyptian mummies. Now, he's not a mummy, but because he looks like a mummy, I wanted to relate it to Egypt. Back in Bible times, what kind of diseases might the ancient Egyptians have suffered from? Okay, I'm going to just say the answer is everything. Everything. You're going to see why here in a second. After the children of Israel left Egypt, Moses wrote, this is in Torah, Exodus 15, if you will give ear to God's commandments and keep all his statutes, the Lord Jehovah says, I will put none of these diseases upon thee, which I brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord that healeth thee. Okay? That could very well be a supernatural statement, that God's going to give supernatural protection. Whether it is or isn't, I'm not debating tonight. What I'm going to show you is that if you keep the commandments of God, you're guaranteed not to get the sicknesses of the Egyptians. Here's an ancient Egyptian medical book. It was discovered from Egypt, and it was called the Ebers Papyrus, or Papyrus Ebers. It's one of the oldest. There's one of 3 or 4 ancient medical books of antiquity, and this is one of them. And they all kind of read the same about the way you do. Basically, look, here's remedies. That's an actual picture of what they look like, the papyrus. But Egyptologists have deciphered, and they know pretty much what Egyptian hieroglyphics say now. And they basically used worm's blood, blood of the black calf, dung or excrement from asses, dogs, cats, donkeys, and flies, and medicines. Okay, an ancient Egyptian medical cabinet would include dust from a statue, mouse tails, cat's hair, dog's toes, various animal fats, human semen. And there's a ton of other stuff too. There's even dust of a statue. Okay, it's very, 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 more than half the book is like witchcraft. Okay, they don't think that these are potions or actually witchcraft. They actually think that this is what their gods wanted them to do, and that these things actually have medicinal value. Okay, this is I don't know if you ever heard of dung beetles, okay, but they collect, animal feces and they roll it up in a ball, and it's kind of pretty cool if you ever watched them. And it's so fascinating that the Egyptians wanted to make a medicine paste out of it. Okay, this is just an example of what's in the Papyrus Ebers. You can read it, okay. Red lead, antelope dung, entrails of aquatic animal. Okay, I don't even go into it all. Okay, it's just about 20% of what the Egyptians said to do would kill you. Okay, why I'm telling you that is Egyptian culture was one of the greatest cultures of antiquity. Okay, you're going to compare that to the Bible. Okay, there's no compare. Well, there is a comparison. Following the Egyptian medical practice would kill you. Following the Bible with the Jewish laws would keep your people alive for generations without ever having plagues. Okay, here's some other ones. There's cures for everything, for diabetes, constipation, migraines. Okay, a clay effigy of a crocodile with herbs. Okay, and this is literal. This isn't, nobody's making this up as a joke. All the stuff that Egyptians' medical book would have you do. Okay, one of the diseases you could contract is leptospirosis. It's from coming in contact with rodent droppings. Okay, it's early flu-like symptoms. Later, it leads to seizures and paralysis. Book of Leviticus said, "These also shall be unclean to you among the creeping things that creep upon the earth. The weasel, the rodent, and the tortoise." Jews weren't allowed to be around that when all other Gentiles would have been like, let's play with the little mouse. Trust me, it's dangerous. Like, there's so many diseases that rodents carry. It's just unbelievable. Now, if you got your little pet rat and it never you kept in your house in a cage all its life and it never came in contact with anything else, it's probably okay to play with. But the thing is, in the wild, these things pick up diseases, and eventually it gets on people. Okay, sporangiosis is a tapeworm in vital organs. It comes from applying a frog or snake skin on wounds as a poultice. So you get a cut, you put frog skin or snake skin because it's soothing, it's kind of cool, and it's moist. It feels good. Yeah, but you can get this disease, this tapeworm, that it'll kill you. It'll get to your vital organs. These are unclean unto all that creep. Whosoever touches them, when they be dead, they shall be unclean until the evening. Amphibians and reptiles are unclean in Judaism. So you could never even, let me just tell you, in Jewish culture, if you ever touched a mouse, you'd have to wash your hands and take a bath. If you ever played with a frog or a snake, and kids would have to do it too. They'd have to wash their hands and take a bath before they were allowed back before they were allowed back into the community. Okay, it's not even into the house. They're forbidden. You're not playing with a rat. Okay, mother says to the little kid, muesli or whatever your name is, you're not playing with a rat. And then a little kid's muesli's Gentile friend named Stephen is playing with a cat. Actually, Stephen's a Jewish name. I can't. Anyway, or playing with a mouse or a rat. Why can't I play with the mouse? Well, my friends are. Because you're Jewish, you can't do it. Moses said no. Okay, you can't play with snakes. You can't play with frogs. I'm serious. These conversations were taking place every year. Okay, with Jewish kids. Okay, gnathomatosis, a migrating worm-like parasite, causes agonizing pain followed by paralysis. It comes from applying raw meat on wounds, like as a poultice again. Like, I remember, this is no kidding, man. The neighbor kid, he was a real big kid too. I made him mad one day. He punched me. My jaw was swollen up like twice the size. My uncle was like, hey, put a steak on it, okay? Okay. No, now our steaks are probably okay. But no, don't do that, because This is a worm parasite, agonizing pain and paralysis. Who wants that? But here, look at the lifestyle. I want you to see the life cycle of this parasite. Because if all you had, now just for this thing, if all you have was a dog or cat, you're not going to get that. You have to have also, you got to have dog and cat, amphibians, and either ducks or pigs. It's one of the reasons that ducks are unclean in Judaism. Pigs are unclean, dogs and cats, sorry, they're unclean in Judaism, reptiles are unclean. So if you got pigs, but you don't have dogs and cats or reptiles, you're okay, okay? If you got ducks, but you don't have reptiles or dogs and cats, you're okay. Actually, you can even have reptiles and ducks, but no dogs and cats, you're okay. The pig is also like the dog and cat. Okay, so those are the mammals, right? So that's in the life cycle of this bacteria that kills people, or actually a worm, that kills people. Leviticus says, of their flesh you shall not eat, and their carcass you shall not touch. They are unclean to you. Unclean also means non-kosher. Jews can't touch this stuff. They can't eat it. If they touch it, they got to wash their hands. If they play with it, they got to take a bath, okay? This is out of the ancient Jewish laws, particularly the book of Leviticus. Like I said, these are unclean animals, every one of them, according to Moses and the Torah. Concepts of disease in the ancient world. The ancient Egyptians used medicines more like witchcraft, not science. It wasn't until the 1500s that basically the age of the Greeks where they started to think about using scientific methods to try to heal disease. So for the first time in history, they tried to understand history from science. And they basically, in the 1500s, doctors believed that all illnesses were caused by bad blood or bad phlegm or bad yellow bile or bad black bile. If you had an imbalance in the four bodily humors. There's scientific medicines to treat diseases. If somebody had mental illness, they gave them walnuts. I'm not kidding. This is really, and I'm not picking on them either. They didn't know any better, right? It's a start. It's better than using worm's blood. Okay. But a walnut nut looks like a brain. So they said if your brain's sick, eat walnuts. And that's true. This was medicine. And I'm showing you this to compare it to the Bible, because once we get into the Jewish laws, you're going to be like, wow. You're going to be like, I'm going to be on that. I want to be on their side. Okay. The bubonic plague from 1340 to 1771, it killed 75 million people worldwide. Not quite as much as smallpox, but this one was really, for some reason, this one was like, it just was, because when it hit Europe, a third of Europe died. And it was really fast, okay? You were dead, and once you got symptoms, you're dead in like a week, okay? They also called it the Black Death in the 1300s because your skin would turn black. That's from the septicemia, and then your blood would coagulate. That's a picture of the dying people. They say one third of Europe died. It was caused by rats and fleas. Remember I told you, non-Jewish cultures, garbage was in the streets, actually under their houses too. I'll explain that in a second. But the rats ate their garbage. These are the garbage men of the Gentiles for 3,000 years. There's no reason to not have them be. They're your garbage men, unless you paid attention to Moses in the book of Leviticus. If you paid attention to Moses in the book of Leviticus, you would never allow rats to be your garbage men. But these are typical houses back then. There's floorboards that have little cracks in them. Sweep the stuff in the floorboards. Even lift up the little cubby hole and sweep the stuff down. And your rats are going to eat it down under your house, no problem. The problem is when you get a massive rat infestation, the fleas eventually leave the rats and start jumping up to fresher blood, right? Warmer, not fresher blood, but humans. I guess humans, I don't know. Fleas like humans too. Okay, when a flea bites you and it has Yersinia pestis, is that bacteria, okay, that causes plague, you'll get a little sore on you, and it's called a bubo. It's not deadly. It'll eventually your body will fight it off, but it'll be cause like a red scar for a while. Could itch, could hurt, be a little open sore. Problem is, if you scratch it and then touch your face, if you breathe it into your lungs, it goes from bubo or bubonic plague. It goes from bubonic plague to pneumonic plague. You're dead in 7 days. What did they do for pneumonic or bubonic plague? Well, what they did is the doctor would take ashes and blow them in your face so you'd sneeze out the bad air. They felt it was bad air, so you'd sneeze out. So they used ashes. They blow in your face to make you sneeze. And they also put flowers. They thought that you needed better air, so they put flowers because flowers smelled good. They put flowers in your pockets around your face and in your collar. Okay, in a ring, they put a wreath of flowers around your neck or fill them in your pockets so that the flowers are around your nose. The flowers have to be here where your nose smells, because if you don't smell the bad smells, these were plague doctor outfits. Okay, part of the reason for these is fear of the people. They started, and later on you'll find why. Initially, they would just wear the head thing, not the whole outfit. This is actually a real one. This is preserved from antiquity. They put flowers in the nose piece so you could smell, you wouldn't have to smell the death, because there's a lot of people dying in plague. There's decomposing bodies. Somebody had to move the bodies and all. Well, the plague doctor would come and look at you, and he'd wear one of these. Eventually, they suited up everything, okay? Now, I'll explain that in a second. The people that buried these folks, and some of you probably know this, but the people that buried these people, the professional burier people, the grave people, grave diggers, they came up with a little song because, man, they're seeing everybody, if you see one or two people die, three people die, it's a sad thing. But if you're used to being a mortician, even in the operating room, we can sing when we're working, even though we're looking at bloody stuff because we do it all the time. Well, they made up songs too, okay? The song Ring Around the Rosie, okay, remember this, right? Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posy, ashes, ashes, they all fall down, okay? That's from bubonic plague era, English. And they made that song up because people were dying. They put ring around the rosie's the nose. Pocket full of posy, that's flowers in your pockets. Ashes, sneeze out, they still died. The Black Plague was thought to be a scourge from God, okay? Desperate to stop the plague, the people of Europe turned to what? The Holy Bible. Because what is it? They say in the foxholes, no one's an atheist, right? When there's nothing else to turn to, people turn to a God. I'm not saying they turn to the God. They turn to a God since the people of England were Christian, either Catholic or Protestant, they turned to the Bible. And their answer was that God's angry, so we're going to punish ourselves for our sins. And there would be professional people that would go from city to city and beat themselves or hang themselves on a wooden piece of wood like Jesus on a cross, or cover their heads to where they couldn't see, okay, and hit themselves with canes, okay, or whips. They called them flagellants. And they did it because they wanted God, look, punish us, but don't kill everyone, okay, and don't kill us, okay, we're submitting, we're repenting. It didn't work. What did work was people started to read the Bible for once, right? Because before this, only the priests and the church leaders read the Bible. Well, the public was desperate. So one place in Leviticus said, if the plague be spread in the garment, the plague is a fretting affliction, is unclean, therefore burn that garment. They started burning. This is when they started separating plague things from sick people from living people because of that. Okay, there's another verse that's even better than this one, but they started doing that because of Leviticus. But I'm going to tell you, this is a very sad picture, right? Okay, I'm going to explain this in a second. This is a literal picture that was it was called the Nuremberg Chronicle from, actually it was written slightly after 1348 and 1337. But this was an article that a doctor regularly wrote in the article. Before you read that, Jewish people at the time, okay, Jewish community, the Jewish religion kept separate from Gentiles. If you read the New Testament, Peter didn't want to go into a Gentile's house. Peter was Jewish. If he did, if a Jewish person went into a Gentile's house, they would have to take a bath, literally immerse themselves, basically be baptized, immerse themselves in water before they were allowed to go back into a Jewish home again. Okay, and there are a lot of reasons that you don't want to take a bath unless you have to, because one, the water's not warm. Okay, and plus you have to go to where there's the water. Okay, it's called a mikveh. I mean, it's like an hour, it could be an hour and a half ordeal. Okay, and you freezing cold. Okay, in the wintertime. No, I'm not going to that Gentile's house. Okay, they didn't associate with Gentiles because Gentiles were considered unclean, not because they're playing with rats or whatever. Even though they're unclean because they play with rats, but they didn't know that was bad. They just knew that God said that rats are religiously unclean, religiously inappropriate for you Jewish children to play with. It's religiously inappropriate for you Jewish people to be anywhere near your feces or anywhere near garbage. Okay, the garbage had to be burnt outside the city. You wouldn't have garbage in your houses or under your houses or in your streets. Okay, it's weird religious laws that Moses told you to do. And it's going to take a lot of time. Okay, actually, the Jewish laws could have taken a household like an hour and a half to 2 hours a day to actually do it all. If you're considering all the people, like, to go to the bathroom, you had to walk. We had to walk like 30 minutes outside the camp. Okay, man, if I'm a Gentile, all I have to do, it's going to take me 5 minutes. I'm going to go down the street in the alleyway. Okay, I'm not going to spend 30 minutes walking. Okay, because I'm a businessman. I don't have that time. Okay, this Jewish people went to great lengths because the Bible said, Moses said in the Torah, this is what you got to do. Just our weird religious laws that separate us from the Gentiles. It makes us clean and them unclean. I know you don't know why, but this is what the rabbi would say. I know you don't know why, and I don't really know why either, but God said it, and we're not going to do it. Okay, because God said it. We're going to keep ourselves separate. Well, because they kept themselves separate, Jewish people didn't get hit. Their communities they lived separate from Gentiles. They did not get hit with plagues. Cholera, dysentery, all that, none of it. Those that would kill millions of people would not hit them, including plague didn't hit them. Okay? And initially, I'm not saying plague didn't come, plague ended up going to the Jewish communities because, why? Because if a Gentile is infected and he's still yet to develop symptoms and he's out in the public, okay, and a Jewish person's doing business and shaking hands with them or whatever in the world, now the Jew would go home and take a bath. But if you happen to breathe it in when that Gentile person coughed, the Jew would get the pneumonic version of the plague. He'd take it home. So eventually Jews died too. But initially they never did. It was always a later thing that developed. And that was so well recognized that in Germany, a publication and a physician wrote that they were poisoning the food. It's obvious the Jews are poisoning our food because they're not getting sick and we are. And why they would think that is, okay, if we were Jews in this room and we had this food in this table, I'm not kidding, this is literally true, Orthodox Jews, and a Gentile walked in the room by accident because we wouldn't invite him in, we'd have to throw all the food away, even if we spent good money on it. That was the rabbinical law. The Bible didn't say to do that, but that's the rabbinical law. Well, all it takes is a few Gentiles to see Jews throwing food away, okay? Why are they throwing good food away? And they're saying, they're not going to tell the Jew, the Gentile, because they don't want to be hated. They're not going to say, you came in, now we got to throw the food away. They're going to be, oy vey, throw the food away, throw the food away. They're not going to say, why? It takes a couple of that times, and the Gentiles are going to be thinking, well, what's wrong with the food? Okay, that's why when the Jews didn't die, the Gentiles in Germany thought the Jews are poisonous, and this is literally true. The burning of the Jews in the 14th century during the Black Plague, the bubonic plague, Jews were perceived as being less susceptible to the plague than their neighbors, likely the result of Jewish ritual regarding personal hygiene, and they were accused of poisoning the Christian wells. That's not what the Chronicle said, okay? That's about the Chronicle. Here's what the Chronicle said on this page, and this is an English translation. Okay, CC, if that's 100, let's page what? I don't know what page that would be, or what. I don't read Roman numerals, but English translation. The miserable, wretched Jews. This is what a physician wrote, a Gentile physician. The miserable, wretched Jews in AD 1337 at Deckendorf on the Danube in Bavaria, when the truth was established, and that means, okay, they tortured them. Okay, I'll explain it in a minute. When the truth was established, they were deservedly condemned to death. Thereafter, in the year AD 1348, all Jews in Germany were burned. That's burned alive, okay? Or if they had to be killed, because they wouldn't go alive, be taken alive. Having been accused of poisoning the wells, as many of them confessed. Why'd they confess? Well, they tortured them, okay? You understand back then, if you wanted to get somebody the truth, you'd have to torture them. And it was called examination, or the Inquisition. We're going to find out. We're going to torture you. Eventually, you'll be so confused and you'll be so crazy with pain that you're going to shout out the truth. Well, to stop being tortured, they said, we did it, and they didn't. Okay, but they confessed under torture. We poisoned your food. This is unbelievable. All the Jews in Germany, this is before Hitler. They killed them all, burned them alive, because they followed God's law and they didn't get sick. What helped spread the plague? Okay, the answer is quarantine. It comes from the Italian word quaranta, which means 40. Venice, Italy instituted a quarantino, that's 40 days, and they particularly built little islands to do it on around Venice. They ultimately did it because of this Bible verse. All the days wherein the plague shall be in him, he shall be defiled, he is unclean, he shall dwell alone outside the camp, shall his habitation be. The thing is, though, that the Gentiles didn't figure this out. The Gentiles ended up doing it because it worked. It's the only thing that stopped plague. But here's who started it. Around 1347, a Jewish physician named Jacob of Padua, established a treatment area outside the city walls for those who were sick, basically sick with plague. Okay, and he did it because of Leviticus 13:46. He didn't understand bacteria, but he understood the difference between the clean and the unclean. Jews didn't get sick, and when you're sick, the Bible said you keep the sick people away from the healthy people. It had never been done before. Quarantine. But Black Plague, the people were so desperate to stop it, and it seemed to work. This Jewish physician was doing it. Italy was stopping the spread of the plague. Then everybody did it. Oh wow, it got cut off there. Okay. Well, quarantine, huh? Okay, this is basically, it's touching clothing, bedding, drinking cups. Sorry, you can't read that. Touching clothing, bedding, drinking cups, or inhalation from a close distance, like less than 6 feet. Look at this. Leviticus 15 and Numbers 19. And whosoever toucheth his bed, or anyone that has the sickness, whoever touches, or whoever has plague, whoever touches his bed shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the evening. Okay, that means you can't come to your house until evening. Also, whoever sits on any whereon the person with the issue sat, the issue means a draining sore or a sickness, he shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the evening. Numbers 19. This is the law when a man dieth in a tent or a dwelling place. All that come into the dwelling and all that is in the dwelling shall be unclean 7 days. And every open bottle which has no lid bound upon it is unclean. Okay, this one here is really interesting because the Bible makes a difference between if you had an open Coke can or a closed Coke can. Hey, did the elephant cross the bridge yet? Okay, do you think you can trust the Bible? Okay, you know, you compare the Word of God to anything else. Okay, and it's like the difference is night and day. The difference is the difference of infinity. Okay, this is so exact. You can't touch the person. You can't. They're supposed to be separate. And once they're outside the camp, if you go in to their house and if you touch their bed, you got to wash your clothes. If you sit down in anything that they sat on, you got to wash your clothes and bathe yourself. And if you go into a house where somebody died, you're allowed to drink from any like if they had a pitcher that had a lid on it and it was a sealed lid, you could drink from it. But if it had been opened, you couldn't. It's so exact that it'd be mind blowing if there wasn't a God that wrote the Bible. So anybody notice anything strange about this picture? Yeah. Okay. And he might be dead too. This is a stand that's holding her up. He could be being propped up partly by the gun and a thing behind him that you can't see. Okay. Yeah. It looks like there's a base behind him. Okay. What was going on is this is probably two members of the same family that died of the same illness. And it was a fairly wealthy family. You'll see why. Okay. And they paid a mortician to stage them and take a photograph so the family would have something to remember them by. But here's less affluent people, okay? The girl's deceased. The mom's brokenhearted holding their daughter, okay? They're both passed away, okay? And this guy's been dead a little bit longer than the kid, okay, unfortunately, okay? Why I'm showing you this is that in early America, this was really common amongst the Gentiles. Jews would have never done this because the Jews had burial people called the Chevra Kadisha. Somebody dies, nobody's allowed to touch them except these people. This is the law when a man dieth in a tent or a dwelling place. All that come into the dwelling and all that are in the dwelling shall be unclean for 7 days. Whosoever touches a dead body or a bone of a man or a grave shall be unclean 7 days. And on the 7th day, he shall purify himself by washing his clothes and bathing himself in water, and then he shall be clean at the evening. Okay, this protected the Jewish nation from dying of the illnesses that the dead people died of. Okay, possibly the burial people would get sick and die. Unfortunately, they were risking their life. But they protected the population by not being allowed to be in the population for 7 days. Okay, these people were, I don't even know how you would ever be that. Okay, really. Okay, I don't even know how. Anyway, that's the way it was. Okay, that's the worst job in all Israel, and somebody had to do it, and somebody did. Pictures of leprosy, plague. It's not just by touching. You can get this by coughing and sneezing. Okay, both of those. Isn't it interesting? Leviticus. And the afflicted person in whom the plague is, he shall cover the upper portion of his lip and shall cry, unclean, unclean. I don't know if you've ever seen Ben-Hur, when the lepers, they're walking around like this, unclean, unclean. Okay, they're covering their face. Why? That's what we do when we cough. Okay, we haven't been doing that since until the 20th century. Jews did it 3,000 years before that, 3,000 years before that, okay? This is something that only Gentiles would be doing in recent times. Jews had to do that for 3,000 years, okay? All the days where the plague shall be in him, he is defiled, he's unclean, he shall dwell alone outside the camp shall his habitation be. And if you're sick, so if you just have a little illness and you're walking around, okay, but if you're actually like really sick, like destitute sick, you weren't allowed to be around anybody. I'm going to focus on this for 1 second because right here, so what's wrong with this picture? Yeah, so that's Torah, that's not. Okay, but what I want to explain something is, okay, when this modern COVID, right, they'd make her have to wear a mask, okay? Okay, now here's why this is whack. Okay, if you're sick and you have symptoms, Bible said cover your face. If you don't have symptoms, even if you have the virus, here's why this is important, okay? And probably like someday I could get killed for saying this, okay? Because really, really, really powerful people want you to have everybody to wear masks. But the real truth of the matter is when a virus breaks out, a new virus that's deadly breaks out in a community, right? Anywhere. The thing is, the virus doesn't have a brain, but it's not wired to want to kill its host. You understand? Because if all its hosts die, the virus dies. You understand? The natural occurring viral illnesses that are deadly in the human population or animal population end up weakening over time. Why they weaken is here's why. Each person, over time, the virus can mutate a little bit in each person and get a little bit different strain. A deadlier strain is likely to kill people. They're going to be drop dead. They're not spreading it. The ones that are walking around that are healthy are the ones that are spreading it. Okay. If you happen to have no symptoms at all, like, a lot of people in COVID had no symptoms whatsoever, even if they have it and I don't, I want to get it from them. I don't want to get it from the guys that are sick, because the ones that are sick might have a worse strain. You understand? Now, why I'm telling you this is that in the Bible's way better than what they told us to do during this last pandemic. The Bible said the sick people covered themselves, not the healthy people. And then the natural progression of the illness is it's called herd immunity will develop. What they did was they prevented herd immunity. I say they did it on purpose. I don't want to go into why and all that. It's political. But the idea of healthy people wearing masks delays the natural progression of the weakening of a virus in the population. It's actually is worse for the population. It might not be worse for, say, sick people wearing a mask, healthy people wearing a mask might save somebody from getting it. But eventually, you're prolonging it in the population. Are you gonna stay hidden in your house for months? Okay, which is kind of what they wanted us to do, right? They wanted us to stay hidden for months. Okay, so in the Bible, any skin disease equals plague, or any severe illness equals plague. If you just had a little sniffles or something like that, you cover your face. But if you're debilitated, like bedridden or skin showing sores, it's called plague in the Bible. And the afflicted person in whom the plague is, he shall cover the upper portion of his mouth. He shall dwell alone outside the camp. It's kind of sad. I mean, you have to send away your loved ones. Gentiles would have never done it, and it broke Jewish hearts to do it. Grandma's sick, or my wife's sick. I got to send her out to the camp. It's horrible. Or your child, imagine you have a child, you got to leave them alone outside, But if you didn't, people end up like that. So Leviticus also, most of these Bible verses are from Leviticus. Whatsoever goes upon its paws among all manner of animals that go on all fours, these are unclean to you. Basically, any animals with paws are unclean. I love dogs. I sleep with my dog, okay? But it's dangerous to sleep with your dog, okay? Because it ticks, right? Diseases carried by dogs. Here's the number one thing we have in Oklahoma from dogs is ticks on dogs. You can get Rocky Mountain spotted fever, Lyme's disease, babiosis, ehrlichiosis, and anaplasmosis. Okay, these three, usually you heal from them yourself, okay? But they kind of make you sick, headaches and stuff, and weak. Okay, this one can kill you. That one doesn't kill you. Well, I can't remember if that kills you, but this one here leaves you with joint pain. The black-legged deer tick, these are real small ticks. That's that one. That causes Lyme's disease. The American dog tick or the Lone Star tick cause these other ones. I'm going to tell you how real this is. I got ehrlichiosis from sleeping with my dog. You take tetracycline. Okay, it's no big deal. Okay, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, same thing, but this one can kill you. My dog actually had that. Same one that probably gave me ehrlichiosis. The way I found that out was my dog started peeing in the bed. It didn't have to, but it kept doing it. And I couldn't figure out, what's wrong with her? Okay? Because peeing in the bed, you got to change your bed sheets and everything. It makes you mad because she was going outside. She knew she didn't have to do that. She's trying to tell me something was wrong. I finally figured out after like the fourth time, I said, Holly would have never done that on purpose. It's like she jumps up on the bed to go to the bathroom on purpose because there's a reason. I took her to the vet. She had Rocky Mountain spotted fever, okay? He did a blood test. If a tick from her would have bit me, I could have died. So this doesn't happen a lot, but it can, And it's because dogs are unclean in Judaism, okay? Here, leishmaniasis comes from infected sand flies. We don't have them in Oklahoma, thankfully. That can get on humans too, okay? And if it gets inside, it's deadly, okay? Visceral leishmaniasis kills people. Here's cutaneous leishmaniasis, okay? Mice and possums carry it too, not just dogs and cats. So all animals with paws carry it, okay? Chagas disease, incurable in late stages. It's also carried by other animals with paws. Okay, all these animals can be vectors for in the life cycle of Chagas disease. How you get it is the kissing bug, right? These are in Oklahoma, and there's actually a lot more of them now. I've seen them on my farm. We're almost having like a little infestation of them. Last year, anyway, I don't know about this year, but these bugs with the long snout, they poke you and it gives you a little painful little bite. It's not horrible like a bee, but it can cause this disease. It'll make wherever it bites you will swell up real bad. And if it's untreated, it can be deadly in the end. The Bible said, whatsoever goes upon its paws, those are unclean to you. If you didn't live around these animals, okay, you wouldn't get that. Now here's something else. Armadillos carry leprosy. Right, now he knows that, right? I'm telling you how I found this out. This is I don't know if I should tell the whole story because it's whacked, but it's true. He was a mentally deficient kid in Florida, sort of like fell in love with an armadillo. He'd sleep with it, okay? And he probably literally fell in love with it because he ended up getting leprosy on private parts, okay? I'm dead serious. I read about it, okay? He got it from the armadillo, okay? These carry rabies, these two right here, right? There's a lot of things that animals with paws, a lot of illnesses that animals with paws carry. This is a list of diseases carried by possums. You can read it later. These also shall be unclean to you among all the creeping things that creep upon the earth, the weasel, the rodent, and the tortoise. Plague, we know, comes from rats and their fleas. Rodent urine, you can get hantavirus from breathing airborne urine and dust and lungs filled and your lungs filled with fluid. You're breathing airborne urine and dust, and then your lungs filled with fluid, and it kills you, right? And it can kill you pretty quickly. This actually breaks out every couple of years, breaks out on Indian reservations where the Indians just live with the rats. I remember reading a story a long time ago of a young Indian boy that liked to play with the rats. For some reason, they don't hate rats. Indians don't in the reservations. Well, if you have a, and I'm not saying all reservation, but if you have a building that had a lot of rodents in it over years, and then you're going to go clean it and sweep it out, you want to wear a respirator mask, okay? Because this will kill you really, really fast before they know what you have. When it breaks out, each time it's broken out, there's been like 3 or 4 deaths before they figured out what it was. Leptospirosis, touching dead rodents or urine deposits with an open cut on your hand. That leads to organ failure. Washing prevents it. So if you touch it and wash your hands, Jews, wash your hands. The Bible's Bible's literally like, it's the most blessed book in the universe. Schistosomiasis, it's a worm parasite carried in snails. Snails are unclean in Israel. Okay, that little boy has it. It can affect your liver, your urinary bladder, and other organs. Freshwater snails carry it. You walk, you have a little cut on your foot, and the bacteria can get to you, or the worm can get to you. Sorry, it's not a bacteria. These are unclean: the ferret, the chameleon, the lizard, and the snail, and the mole. So not only schistosomiasis, but angiostrongyliasis is also a parasite carried by rats, transmitted to snails through rat dung. Also eating undercooked snails. That invades your central nervous system, causing an unbearable headache, eventually convulsions and psychosis before you die. Leviticus, whatsoever has no fins or scales in the water, that shall be an abomination unto you. Shellfish, you're not supposed to eat it if you're a Jew. Why? Because it may contain neurotoxins during warm months. They carry lung fluke, the juices of raw crustaceans as medicine. If you take, like raw shrimp or raw lobster or something, and some people would try to use it. They cut themselves, they'd crack a little shrimp on them, and because it felt soothing or whatever, it can cause, the lung fluke's horrible, man. Hemorrhagic tracts of destruction through the lungs. This is a sign in California. Say, quarantine, do not eat mussels from these waters from May 1st to October 31st. I've actually seen that sign. I used to live in California briefly. The dark meat from clams should be discarded and not eaten ever, really. Meat could be poisonous. But I eat clams, but you gotta cook them real good. And in California, you don't eat them in the warm waters, okay? But there's a reason God said don't eat shellfish. Some people say it also causes gout I'm not 100% convinced of that, but it could. Leprosy, that's a picture. That guy has leprosy. This is anthrax. That's a little sore of anthrax. The thing is, anthrax is deadly. If you get anthrax in your lungs, man, it's over. Here's dead animal hides and contaminated items. Leviticus 13 prevents anthrax. When any unclean creature dies and falls on something, that article, whatever its use, will be unclean. Whatever it is made of, wood, cloth, hide, or sackcloth, put it in water and it will be unclean to the evening, then it will be clean. You have to basically wash it. You got to put it in water. Okay, and who used to get anthrax were tanners that work with hides. It's just interesting that it talks about hides. You got to wash it off. But that's a weird religious rule only Jews would have to do. Why are you washing that? It's a ritual. Okay, our God said to do it. If a dead animal falls in a clay pot, this is also in Leviticus. Leviticus is just filled with it. Leviticus is the best medical book in history. Okay, if a dead animal falls into a clay pot, everything in the pot will be unclean and you must break the pot. Okay, for something about clay, you can't ever use that pot again, probably because it's porous. You won't be able to clean it right. Any food or water in the contaminated pot is unclean, and the liquid that could be drunk from that pot is unclean. Anything that any dead carcass falls on becomes unclean, and you're to regard that thing as unclean. Nevertheless, a fountain or pit where there is plenty of water shall be clean, but that which touches the dead carcass shall be unclean. Here's what I'm saying. This is a cistern of water that they would drink from. They can't drink because a mouse fell dead in it. You can't drink from it. You're thirsty. It took you 20 minutes to get there. Oh, there's a mouse in it if you're a Jew. If you're not a Jew, take it out and drink it. I'm serious. Look at this, right? What those verses just said, if a dead mouse or dead rat is over here, you can drink the water over here. You can't drink the water there. Let's go back. Nevertheless, a fountain or a pit where there is plenty of water shall be clean, but that which touches the dead carcass shall be unclean. So anything around in that area of the dead thing, the dead animal, you can't drink that water. But if it's a big enough pit and it's away from that, you can drink it. Man, the elephant crossed the bridge. 10 elephants just crossed the bridge, okay? Right here, this is a spring. If it's a dead mouse in there, you can still drink the water. Why? Because the water is replenishing itself. One of the ways I was blessed was my pathology class was taught by professors from Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland. And our micro guy, infectious disease guy, was a Jewish dude. And he always liked to kind of give little points. And he liked to say, in explaining, he didn't come out and explain this issue and that issue directly, but he told it to us like this. He said, in any infection, there has to be a critical mass of bacteria. You don't just have an open cut, get one or two pieces of, germs, and you get sick from it, okay? Because your body's going to fight off and win. You have to have a lot on it to where it can beat out your immune system at the local site. You understand? It's one of the reasons that hand washing is so valuable. You do not need, this is the dumbest thing in the world, you do not need antiseptic hand wash. In fact, antiseptic hand wash just ends up creating superbugs, okay? You just wash your hands so that you have very little bacteria on them, and you're not gonna cause sickness, okay? If you try to kill everything, only resistant organisms are gonna take over. Bacteria compete against each other. That's why you don't wanna give antibiotics to somebody that's not sick and keep them on for a long time, because they're gonna develop superbugs. The superbug is a bacteria that didn't get killed by your antibiotic. And now it's super powerful because it's got no competing enemies. And the next time you try antibiotics, it already beat that antibiotic and won't work now. But she's right. And I'm gonna say something about this, okay? Acquired immune deficiency syndrome. It's not just a disease of the people that have it. It's a disease that affects everyone in the world when somebody has it. And the reason is, our bodies are what fights infection. If you remember anything about medicine, this is the most important thing you remember. No antibiotic can cure anybody. It only gives you a push over the hill. It's your body that's doing it, okay? If you don't have an immune system, your antibiotics are not gonna save you. Why that's significant in immune deficiency, somebody has immune deficiency, eventually the antibiotic can't work. But what's happened is that the bacteria or whatever it is now resistant to every antibiotic that person's tried. What's developing, because the Bible says in end time there's going to be plagues. One of the things that's going to, man, I shouldn't be saying this because this is like, well, I'll say it this way. One of the things that's going to bring about plagues is resistant organisms. Okay, you can figure out yourself, calculate that such scenario. But people that have a lowered immune system, be it sickness or prolonged illness lowers your immune system. Treating them with antibiotics, it's the humane thing to do. Well, you have to do it. But just know, when the Bible says that we're going to get plague, okay, it's probably true because it's the Bible. I say, if I'd be talking to a secular scientist, I'd say, it's probably true because the Bible said it. I'd say, I know it's true. But I'd tell the secular scientist, you should know it's true too, because our whole system is creating it that way. Okay, because when you treat with antibiotics, antibiotics are effective until they're not. Then the bacteria is resistant to the antibiotic. So it's why that one of the things that's starting to make a comeback is tuberculosis. And the antibiotics aren't starting to not work. Well, the Bible's true. That's why they're now, okay, for me to stay on staff at the hospital, I had to get a blood test called the gold standard test. They just wouldn't let me do the prick test anymore. Because, man, tuberculosis now is starting to be deadly again. Leviticus 15, laws concerning draining sores, recurring vomiting, or prolonged diarrhea. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When any man hath a draining sore or overflowing discharge issue, because of his discharge issue he is unclean. Every bed he lays upon is unclean. Everything that he sits on shall be unclean. Whosoever touches his bed shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the evening. Whosoever sits upon anything the person with the issue sat shall wash his clothes and bathe himself, be unclean in the evening. Whosoever touches a person with the issue and hath not rinsed his hands in water, he shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean in the evening. This is an interesting distinction. If let's say he had a sore on him or a sickness, or he was sick, and I just touched him with my hands, all I'd have to do is wash my hands. But if I went into his house or I didn't wash my hands right away, I'd have to take a bath and change my clothes. Okay, wash my clothes and take a bath. This is what's the number one? The number one, man. I'm not even that smart. I'm just reading weird stuff, okay? Because I'm acting like, hey, don't you people know this? No, but I'm stupid too, right? Or I'm as smart as you, however you want to look at it. But the real truth of the matter is that if you touch something and you wash your hands, you're okay. If you don't wash your hands right away, you're not okay. Okay, but in the hospital, what do? The number one thing we do is hand washing to prevent infection. It's right there in the Bible. Okay, and then 3,000 years the Bible told you to do that, and then it said you wouldn't have to you wouldn't have to take a bath in that freezing cold water in this wintertime. Okay, if you just wash your hands right away. Washing your clothes, we gown and glove, you know. We're almost done. This is a Jewish mikvah. This is where they take a bath, which is a picture of one. Rainwater comes in here and it exits out here. And this is where you also walk down into the bath. What makes a mikvah is it has to be connected to the earth in some way, and it has to have natural flowing water in and out. That way, you know, like you taking like an early frontier, they take a bath in a tub, and the whole family, by the time you got to the 10th kid, you didn't want to touch that water. Okay, well here, this protects you from that because it's constantly being changed over time. But a river, you could baptize in a river. Here's another one. Look, the guy's getting in there, the water's ice cold. Okay, if you're have you ever tried to take a cold shower? Imagine doing it in the wintertime. Okay, when you're a Jewish kid, the last thing you want to do is go in that freezing water. Your parents are, get in. They're pushing you in, right? And you're freezing, okay? But why are we doing this? Is it saving our life? They didn't know that. Moses told us to do it, okay? Nobody would ever do that. I don't even like taking a bath half the time, right? Because not actually, I do like taking a shower, but I'm so busy all the time. I don't have time. It's like it interrupts my day having to take a shower. Okay, I'm serious. Like I'm serious. Actually, they say the older you get, the less more you don't want to. Whatever. Anyway, I'm not there yet, but that dude's in that water, and it's not that pleasant. Okay. The only time you'd want to do it was like it was 100 degrees outside. Yeah, let me in the water then. Anything that a dead carcass falls on becomes unclean, and you regard that thing as unclean. Nevertheless, a fountain where there's plenty of water, we already did that. Plague in the house, he that enters the house is unclean until the evening. He that lies in the house shall wash his clothes. Okay, I'm just going to tell you about this guy. We got like 5 more minutes, but this was a physician he started out in Austria. His name was Ignaz Semmelweis. He was a Jewish physician. He worked in a hospital. It was a teaching hospital, so young medical students were there. A famous teaching house called Allgemeine Krankenhaus in Vienna. He noted that 1 out of every 6 women in the maternity ward died. So when a woman wanted to go have a baby and she was in the hospital, 1 out of the 6 women giving birth were dying. Jewish midwives had much better survival rates. And he noticed that. Like, how'd you like to be a doctor and know that your treatments are killing people? Okay? It's horrible, right? So what did he do? Well, he watched it for 3 years. Eventually, he said, I got to do something. He tried to figure out what could I do? What he noted was that regularly, the regularly examined women died more often than the non-examined women, and he noted it. He didn't say anything, but he kept it to himself. So he was going against the medical establishment, like I do a lot, okay? The medical students, the autopsy room, in the early morning, they would go to the autopsy room in the basement early in the morning and then to the maternity ward in the afternoon. Why would they do that? Well, they didn't have preservatives to preserve a body, so medical students that did dissection on cadavers the homeless people would die the day before. They'd be in the morgue at the basement of the hospital, and the students would dissect them because they were homeless. That was medical school. They'd go straight from there to do examinations on the women, okay? And they wouldn't wash their hands. So they're infecting, they didn't know it, but they're infecting these women, and they're dying from infections, okay? So he instituted careful hand washing procedures, okay? When he started, 1 in 6 women were dying. After he instituted it, only 1 in 42. And then after everyone started doing what he wanted to do, only 1 in 84 died. Okay, the sad part of the story is that the surgeons hated this guy because, for one thing, he just proved that don't come to the hospital to have a baby. Go to the Jewish midwife. You don't need us doctors. Okay, plus it was a pain in the butt to wash your hands. And how do they know for sure that this guy, that's why? They fired the Ignaz Semmelweis. He went to another hospital, did the same thing. Death rates dropped, and they fired him from there too. He ended up committing suicide. Okay, now we could get into why he committed suicide. I'm going to tell you, spiritually, if me or you, right, I'm uncomfortable doing this, but let's just say, I wish there was somebody I thought needed it that was worse off than me, because I'm probably the worse off here. But let's say there's somebody that feels their life is not happy, nothing to live for. If you got nothing to live for, you might as well commit suicide. Why should you live, right? In fact, it's usually the intelligent people that commit suicide. Thing is, if you know God, you always have something to live for. Why? Because to your last breath, you can praise him, and you can always lead someone, right? Even if nobody, she knows what I do, right? I got you guys to come, I had to bribe you with food. In the hospital, they got to be there. So I talk to them, and they can't run away. Okay, so my life might be a pile of crap, and I might think I don't even want to live. But the thing is, if God's using me for something, okay, my life's got worth. So Ignat Semmelweis didn't know God when he killed himself. Because if you know God, your life has worth. If you know the author of this book, okay, that he used to say your life has worth, because the author of that book says your life has worth. And because to your last dying breath, you can praise him, which is the number one thing he wants you to do. And the second thing he wants you to do is to tell people about him. You can do that no matter how bad off you are. So depression and all that, yeah, the bad stuff's going to happen. The Bible says like, if he that lives godly will suffer persecution. There's another verse too. I can't remember what it says, that you'll have trouble in this life somewhere. I can't remember what that. Yeah, that troubles are going to come. Okay. And you're not going to just, oh, I'm going to pray my troubles away. Some people tell you that. That's probably a line of crap. Okay. Okay, but what's true is, here's what's true. You got troubles, you're going to have, even if God delivers you from this one, another one's going to come. And okay, they're still going to, why? Because Satan's going to attack you. You know, I don't even want to even go into this because it's kind of personal and it's sort of hard to talk about, but I became, when I did the last Passover, okay, I became under a massive attack. And I'm going to explain it. Okay. But the thing is, I already knew it was probably going to come, and it came. And the thing is, I'm not going to say, oh, I'm going to go to the church and they're going to pray for me and it's all going to go away. Okay. Because when Paul did the right thing, the messenger of Satan came and buffered him, and he prayed to God. He could heal people from sicknesses. Paul could. He could touch you and make you better. But he couldn't get this thing gone, whatever it was. Okay? And why? Okay? Well, for one thing, you learn from the book of Job, it's not your place to ask why. You can ask why, and you may never know the answer. It doesn't matter. You trust him anyway. But I'll tell you probably why. I'll tell you probably why with me. Because not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord. Okay? If things were great and I accomplished something, it's a notch. It's a star for me. Okay? There ain't no stars if you're serving God. It's a star for Christ, the Messiah. You're just a conduit. And he's going to probably make sure that you're not that great of a conduit. Because if you were, the world would give you the praise. Okay, and the preachers that are out there that are on top of it, if they're not suffering attacks from Satan regularly, they're on his side. I'm telling you, if you're suffering attack, you know, and there's actually Denzel Washington says the same thing. He says, look, if everything's going right in your life, you might want to question what you're doing, because the devil doesn't leave you alone. Okay, if you're doing the right thing. So circumcision, we all know what that is. Okay, how many Gentiles are circumcised? Okay, that's a crazy thing, cutting off the foreskin of the male penis. Okay, why would anybody do that? Well, it happens to be very healthy. But by far, the worst public health problem is raw sewage in the water supply. These things killed more people than any other thing combined, okay, in the history of the world. Okay, and if you think that's the solution, think again. Because remember when I told you that verse outside the camp? Here's what the actual verse really says. Deuteronomy 23. Designate a place outside the camp where you can go and relieve yourself. And as part of your equipment, have something to dig with when you relieve yourself. Dig a hole and cover up your excrement. Even this in a city is going to get into the water supply. The only true best way, now we've got modern sanitation and chemicals. But if we didn't have chemical sewage treatment plants, even that is not right. The best way to do it is everybody goes in their own separate little place and covers it up. That way it doesn't all collect and get a critical mass going. You understand what I'm saying? And that's right out of the Jewish scriptures. It's just that I'm just going to tell you that, and you missed it, but the elephant crossed the bridge, man. It crossed the bridge like 5, 6, 11, 50 times. Okay? There is no way the author of this book is from this time domain. Okay? And here's what I'm closing with. Some people, I gave this talk, this is hard to believe, I gave this talk in a very charismatic church. Some of the people didn't like it. Okay? And I'm going to tell you why. Because they said, well, you seem to be saying that health, God heals people because natural reasons. It's like you're discounting miracles. You don't believe in miracles, Dr. Lee? And they were offended. In fact, they were so offended they didn't want me talking anymore. I'm dead serious, right? I just proved to their kids that they can trust the Bible, but they want the kids praying for the miracle before they can be founded in the Bible. And I'm not saying that they're wicked people or they're saved people, but look, my answer to them is this. I believe in miracles. Jesus healed 10 people with leprosy. That was a miracle, okay? Here are these 10 lepers, Luke 17, and Jesus entered in a certain village. There met him 10 men who were lepers, which stood afar off. And they lifted up their voices and said, Jesus, Master, have mercy upon us. And it came to pass as they went, they were healed. They asked Jesus, let me tell you, if you have leprosy in Jewish times and you're Jewish, your life is over. How many people remember reading, or maybe you filled one out or whatever, your high school yearbook, all your dreams and aspirations, what you want to be? In ancient Judaism, you got leprosy, forget all that, dude. Your life's over. You're never getting married, okay, unless you're going to marry some other leper, okay? You're never going to get a job in society. You're not going to be allowed in the city, okay? Everywhere you walk, you have to cry, unclean, unclean, unclean. Okay, nobody's going to want to talk to you. Nobody's going to want to come near to you. You're going to cross the street on the other side of the street and let people know so they can get away from you. Literally, that's the truth of a leper. Okay, these people, okay, got healed of that. Here, they're all happy. Okay, 9 of them are just rejoicing. Okay, because when God saves you, okay, maybe God saves you. It's like He gives you another chance at life. Okay. He gives you another chance at life. And these people they're loving the life, another chance they got. But you know what? That I wish that those church people would have focused on more than that. They didn't like what I said. I wish it would have focused on this one guy, because this dude here, he got that. But what else does he do? And one of them, when he saw that he was healed, he returned back and he fell on his face at Jesus' feet. And he said, and Jesus said, were there not 10 lepers cleansed? Where are the other 9? And he said unto him, arise, go thy way, thy faith hath made thee whole. Listen, all these guys were healed. Only one was made whole. Why? Okay, this guy here, a Jew, doesn't bow to anyone but God. Why he's kneeling is he recognizes God. Right there, that man not only got a second chance at life, he got eternity. These guys got a second chance at life. God blessed them in the church, but they're going to hell. If you can't recognize that Jesus is God, doesn't matter how great you did in the church, or if the church helps you, maybe your business does better or whatever, okay, you got a second, your life is better. That's not why you have a church. This is why you have a church, so people can go to heaven. Why? Because Jesus said, if you believe not that I am, you will die in your sins. What's that mean? I am, that means I'm Jehovah. If you don't believe I'm Jehovah, you'll die in your sins. Okay, that's why I wanted unsaved people here tonight, because it's a great gospel message that I ended up with. Just got wasted on a bunch of Christians.